All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of one of these years. Off-season edition, and we took a week off last week. Colton was off, and I just didn't want to do one, I don't think. I guess Chris and I could have done one, but it was like there was nothing going on, and I think I knew that there would be stuff going on in the future, and here we are, of course, with plenty to talk about now. Colton, how are we doing? Got some time off a little bit, and now you're back. The Lions waited for you. I saw that. That was good.
They did, yeah. Whenever you go on vacation as a reporter, you just kind of expect things to go off while you're gone. But luckily, they waited for me to get back, my first day back, which is nice. But I took some time off, went to Chicago for a little bit, see some family. And then Thursday through Sunday, I was in Miami for one of my best friends. His bachelor weekend was in Miami. So honestly, I came back kind of needing another vacation, but, it was a good time down there. Got to go to the beach and enjoy the sun and whatnot. So, yeah, it was a good time.
When I was covering one of my last things I did at the Free Press before I was like, I'm done here. I can't do this anymore. We had just had our first kid, and I want to say I was going to take, it was like he was like 3 months old, and I was going to take paternity leave. I had just started it. I just started it like 10 a.m. or something like that, 9:05 on a Monday. And John Beeline quit the Michigan to go to the Cavs. And I wasn't even really covering basketball per se, but they were like, hey, we really need your help. And I'm like, oh my God. So I had to do, that's a 2-week deal or whatever. And I was lucky that didn't take that long. So I ended up having to postpone that, and I was just like, "Oh, I got to make some life changes." After that whole thing, I did.
I do remember that. Actually,
here.
Now that you mentioned, I do remember that time. Yeah,
when he left, I think must have been a holiday. It was like Memorial Day or something. It was right around now, I think. Maybe Mother's Day, something like that. Anyway, yes, you never quite know when you go on vacation if you're going to get yanked back in. But in any event, the Lions did wait for Colton with quite a bit of news here, some expected news, but I think interesting news also, Colton, because the Jared Goff signing, of course, and we'll talk about the numbers and the details and everything else as it goes down. But I got to say, Colton, my first reaction when I saw it, and, the guaranteed number, which is 179. I mean, is that right?
I think 170.
170 over the 4 years, which rounds down to like 40-something per in guaranteed money. Plus that signing bonus is also a big one. I think it's the highest one in history anyway.
Yep.
Anyway, I thought the guaranteed number would be higher. That's actually a little bit lower than I thought the Lions would have to pay for him. So my first reaction, Colton, and I want to get yours too, was this feels a little bit like a win-win, maybe for both sides. I think both sides walked away from that table thinking, hey, we got what we wanted here. I think Goff got more. The Lions spent more money than they were willing to spend on him a year ago at this time, way more. And you know that, not even close. And I don't think he got probably what he would have dreamt of or what he maybe thinks he could have gotten if he'd have pushed this or tested the market, which is maybe fair. But I think both sides left it saying, okay, look, here's a 3-year window where we're going to try to win a Super Bowl. And there's a 4th year too if it happens to work out. But you got a guy now until he's 33 years old or whatever it is, and you got a 3-year window to win a Super Bowl. To me, that's like, boom, perfect. You're going to have to pay him what the market says, and I think this is right on the bottom of what they were going to have to pay him. He's still getting paid really well. He's the highest paid player in the history of the franchise or whatever the hell it is. So good for everybody, right? Like I felt like that was a pretty good all the way around deal for all parties. You're not locked in for like 8 years or something stupid. You didn't pay him like $60 million or something like crazy. You paid him fair. He was okay with it, and on we go. And to me, I thought that was perfect. I didn't really have any complaints with it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are going to say that Goff won just when you see the pure numbers.
Well, sure, it's a lot of money.
Yeah. It is a lot of money for a quarterback, but it's also the going rate for a quality quarterback these days. And Goff is a quality quarterback. And it's like, you can't have it both ways. You're either paying this dude or you're trying to move on and trying to find the next guy and maybe hoping Hendon Hooker is the next thing. And that's a dangerous game to play when you're this close to contention. So you pay the guy, you get him locked up, you put him on a deal that kind of, correlates with the other core players that you locked up this offseason.
Exactly.
And you let them, you open your window and you let those guys rock. Like that's what it was to me. Goff getting the money he did, that was not a surprise. Like, I think there was a time where, maybe Daniel Jones was a good comp and you're like, oh, we can give him 45 mil if, Daniel Jones is getting 40 from the Giants. After last season, that was really not feasible anymore. And especially this past season that they just had, like Goff basically had 2 Pro Bowl quality seasons back to back under Ben Johnson with this team, with this core in place. And that's not going to stop anytime soon, you don't think, just based on the way that they've kind of figured things out here. So if you got a quarterback playing at this level, you have to pay him. And these deals usually get done a year out of free agency. Goff's a free agent next year before this deal was done. So that's why they kind of got it done this offseason. Again, it coincides with Penei Sewell and St. Brown. Now you got these 3 core players locked up for this foreseeable future. You can just build around those guys now. That's what it was. That's why they wanted to get these 3 done this offseason, and that's what they did.
And these were the 3 big ones that we've talked about every year that free agency has come up during the Holmes era, in that people were, why aren't they making a shot at this? Why aren't they taking a swing at that? Why aren't they trading for this guy? Why aren't they doing this? A guy with a contract, Chase Young, be it that or someone else. It was literally for the last 3 things that they just did. Now, Aiden Hutchinson is probably the 4th, but we'll get that in a second. St. Brown, Penei, and Jared Goff were the 3 contracts that they had, no question about it. You've got to pay these guys, and like, to get them all done right now. To me, I thought they were going to get Amon-Ra and Goff done, and I thought they were going to have to wait for Penei, so I thought Penei was going to probably push that and test the market. What I didn't probably realize or think is that, like, he ended up using the same strategy that St. Brown did, right? Like, he's going to get another crack at it when he's younger, which is good for him. But he also took probably less than he could have gotten, I almost wonder, in some ways. That's a pretty good deal for the Lions, I think. You got, like we just said, Goff did not put a gun to their head and say, pay me. You got people chanting my name at Red Wings games. You better pay me more money than everybody in the building. You know what I mean? Like, there was no Lamar Jackson situation here. And there wasn't one because Jared Goff felt like they were going to take care of him, I think. He did not doubt that. And I just thought, the way that they structure that whole thing, because I was very curious, is it going to be like a 5 or 6 year extension? Because that was like, we're getting 3 years was the one that I kept landing on. If you give them the 4th, as long as you have an out after the 3rd, which they do, it's like a relatively 16.5, I think, on the dead cap after the 3rd year. Like, he gets the 70 plus in the signing bonus that he's earned. Everybody's happy. And you just showed your whole roster that you've invested in your best players, right?
Yep.
Like, man, that's got to be, they're going to be in such a good headspace, Colton, like going into the season, because there are no questions. There's going to be nothing hanging over them other than, like, when is Aiden's deal maybe going to get done? And that's not really that big of a deal because they have the money to do it. And now we're not worried about that, right? No one's worried about any of that.
I think the Hudsons are doing just fine money-wise,
Yeah, right. So, but you still, exactly, right. They're not out eating out of a
House of Hutch is doing pretty well
box,
from what I see.
Yes, House of Hutch is doing just fine. But anyway, yeah, it's questions that we've talked about. Can they afford all these guys? Yeah, they can, and they're going to be able to. And then from there, things get more creative. But right now, perfect. What an offseason. This has been to this point, this has been about as good as it can get. I think they've nailed it.
Yeah, no doubt. I think this really, drives the point home. The Lions are trying to take care of their own. And so many of these players were asked, like, what do you think the message is after seeing, St. Brown and Sewell and now Goff, those 3 core players get locked up, and everyone's like, this is what we are. This is what we do. We take care of our homegrown players. Mm-hmm. If you prove yourself in this building with this regime that you're worth building around, we'll keep you. We're not just going to let you go. And that's something that Lions teams of the past didn't do. They let those core players in the 90s go. They tried to replace them. It didn't work out. Things fell apart. And that's the end of the Barry run, right? Like, the way they're trying to build it this year and with this specific, crew in place, they're trying to make sure this thing's sustainable for the long term. And that's what they're doing by re-signing their own guys, taking care of them, and making sure that they're Detroit Lions for a long time. So, yeah, I mean, I even look at Penei Sewell's deal. Yeah, they could have waited because he does have, the 5th-year option. That was a possibility for them. But to me, it was like smart on the Lions' part to
fast as you can go. Yeah,
jump the market with all these guys that are coming up. Same thing with St. Brown. I think there was probably more of an emphasis to get St. Brown done because he was giving them so much production on a 4th-round contract. It's like, all right, let's take care of this guy now. At the same time, look at the receivers that are coming up that are going to have to get paid. AJ Brown got paid right after St. Brown. Justin Jefferson's coming up. CeeDee Lamb. All these other receivers are about to get paid. So you beat them to the market. Beat those other teams to the market. Now you get your guy locked up. Those contracts are going to inflate the market. Make him look like a steal in probably like a year from now even. So, I mean, I think it was really smart on the Lions' part to get this done early. The only one that you can probably argue that they didn't get great value on is Goff. But again,
that's what you got to do.
That's what you got to do. That's quarterbacks these days, man. Like, and again, Tua's going to get paid. Jordan Love's going to get paid. Trevor Lawrence is going to get paid. So a lot of these quarterbacks are going to look at
all
Goff's
guys
deal.
who've done far less than Jared Goff.
Sure, yeah. And all those guys are going to say, "Well, I want that money.
Want more. Yeah,
I want more."
that much and
you
more.
know,
Yeah.
so like it's going to go down.
Yeah.
It's going to balance out over the course of that contract. The way they're kind of structuring it with some of these cap hits, it seems like it's going to be manageable for at least the next 2 years. 2026 is probably the year where it jumps up.
Yeah.
But again, you give yourself an out after 2027 with that team option on Goff's contract. So I think it works out in the end. You've got a nice 3-4 year window to kind of do some damage here and see how far you can go.
It's really rare that you have no-brainers like this, and these are no-brainer signings. Like, obviously, you wanted to re-sign Panay and St. Brown and Goff, and you're going to want to do it with Aiden. And there's some other guys that you're going to want to do, too, that you're not going to be able to. But, there haven't been that many situations over the years where the Lions have had obvious no-brainers. You got to re-sign this guy. There's no question about it. On the roster, there's been a lot of cases where they've had those tough decisions to make because they've drafted, bad one position and then again and again and again. So it's now you got to decide between the guys. The cap has changed over the years, so it's hard to make these comparisons back to every other era. But I guess, Colton, you mentioned the early 90s, the 91 team is the one that stands out to so many people. And, when I went back and wrote about it in the summer a little bit and wrote about how Spielman's deal ended up falling apart, and it was because they just tried to be cheap and stupid and they tried to kick the can, and it wasn't anything more than that. It wasn't anything more than just trying to be we can replace you with a guy who's younger than you and whatever. You're not gonna ever get one over on us. We're going to win every single negotiation. That was the Lions' mantra for the duration of William Clayford's ownership tenure. So to see Sheila Ford now in this situation where this is really the first time she's had to dole out and really make tough decisions. These are the tough decisions. These are the ones that get people hired and fired and all that sort of thing, the extensions. She and the Lions staff approached it with a creative hey, let's try to make this work for both sides. Let's try to get you paid as much as possible. And for two of those dudes, it's let's try to get it twice. Hell with it. Let's try to do it twice because you're so young. We're going to do it right now. I thought that was to be creative enough to do that and not worry about let's just try to lay low and play poker here with these guys. They didn't play any poker. I don't think that there was any mystery at all. It seemed like it was very collaborative from both sides on each. I don't know about Goff's, but with the two young dudes, man, that's never happened here. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of the franchise, quite frankly. Every other guy, even Barry Sanders, they screwed around with his money the entire time he was here. And I just don't think that that's ever existed, that they made it that easy with their three best players. And the takeaway really for the players and everybody watching should be is they're trying to win a Super Bowl, period. That's it. That's what I take away from this.
They're trying to eliminate distractions, not have any talk. You look around the league and all these players are starting to miss OTAs because they want their contract extended or a new deal or redone. You don't have to worry about that here. They're taking care of their guys. These guys are all paid now. They're at ease. They can just focus on football. And that's what this is all about. They have a chance to win a Super Bowl this year. How many times can you say that in May, right, with this franchise?
Right.
So they're trying to eliminate every distraction possible, just shift the focus back on the game, and get this group ready to go. That's what this is all about to me, and that's why you make this move.
And I think it speaks to the communication with the whole group. I think that's really what this is, because there's not when I was at the combine and you were there too, and I'm bouncing around more, I think, than you are with some of this stuff. But I spent a lot of time listening to Joe Schoen and the Giants, and during the Saquon thing, and and there were times where I ended up feeling bad for the dude because I think he was in a situation where he's not really in charge. I think he's got people telling him what to do. But you could tell that the relationship between the franchise and him and the owner and his agent was horrific. It was just unsalvageable, so bad that they just didn't speak. And you could tell, it was obvious. That is so far the opposite of what's happening here, right? Like I said, Goff was the one mystery to me because he's been around a long time and you just don't know. But my sense with the younger guys, the guys they've drafted, they are, when they say we take care of our own, that's a familial type situation. That I think that they're so close. Front office, ownership group, everybody. We saw Amon-Ra when he came out and did the celebration. He did it at the facility, crying out loud. He didn't do it somewhere else. Pretty cool and pretty rare. Not something we see every day all across the league. I got to say that.
Oh, even Panay Sewell, I think Brad Holmes was the one that kind of gave him the lays to wear over his neck when he went up to his press conference with us, which is just a really classy move and a classy gesture. And
amazing.
Something Sewell himself said was kind of an appreciation of his culture and kind of let him know that, hey, we actually care about you. This is not just transactional. Like you're part of this family. So to hear these things coming from the Lions of all teams,
I know,
after all these years of the way they've done business, times are different, man. They really are, and this is all a sign of that.
It's like a movie or something. Like I don't know. It's like somebody woke up one day and was like, "All right, Sheila, here you go, last shot, bang, we're gonna try this again." And because you're sitting here waiting for them to make some sort of like colossal mistake. I think that's what everyone is still doing out there, right? Everyone is still sort of sitting there waiting. And I guess I would say I was too, to a degree. I thought one of these 3 deals was going to get screwed up. I was just like, there's no way they're going to nail all 3 of these. I would have, like the St. Brown one, I was like, I went into maybe April thinking, we'll see what happens here. And then I left the combine being like, okay, I think they got a pretty good plan there. They're going to have to eat it on Panay, and they'll probably be fine with Goff, but they're still going to have to probably eat it there too. They didn't really have to eat it with any of them. It was like pretty good planning. They were out in front of it. You could tell they were way out in front of it with at least the 2 young guys. And the organization right now is really, really good. There are people in the organization that deal with money and contracts. The Lions don't let any of the media talk to. They like hide them under the ground.
They really do.
But those people exist, and I hope people know that the Lions actually have one of the better front offices right now with people behind the scenes that nobody even knows who they are. You know what I mean? People that don't exist, people that you'll find out who they are in time, but like
when they're with another team.
People that we've been trying to crack at for a while, but it's like, no, talk to him instead because he's in line for a promotion or whatever. But they are in a really good spot right now, are they not? Like across the board with what you need, the communication from front office to coaching staff, front office to player, coach to player, player to front office, vice versa, the whole thing. Everybody, there's no secrets in that building. It doesn't seem like at this point.
No, it's a very well-oiled machine that they have going on right now. When it comes to free agency, the types of players that they'll go after, the draft, as we know, the coaching staff, the development from that, and Dan Campbell's staff on down to the types of players that they're bringing in, the mindset they have, and going back again to players not showing up to camp.
Yeah.
If you're trying to pick someone that wouldn't show up to camp, I don't even know who you could start with because there's so many dudes on this team that like they would even play through, even though if they might have that opportunity to skip. I don't know if they would. Like St. Brown, if they didn't want to pay him this offseason, would have every right to just not show up for OTAs. And yet I would never in a million years imagine that happening. Like that's just not his mindset, the way he's wired. So, I mean, from top on down, it is a well-oiled machine. They've gotten the right group in place. And there are some really smart people in this front office that know what they're doing. I don't know if you want. We can probably mention some of them.
Go ahead, go for it. Because
Mike Disner,
people that are thinking ahead here. Like
Mike Disner, I think is one of the best, cap minds in the NFL. Probably a really well kept secret by the Lions. Brandon Sosno, the same situation. Those 2 guys, I think, are doing a lot of the dirty work and heavy lifting. So you got those guys doing their jobs. You got Holmes and his department doing their job. You got the coaching staff in place with these former players that have been here and done that. And the players and their mindset. So like you look at the Lions from top on down, it's a pretty good deal, man. It really is.
Yeah. Mike Disner's been around for a minute too. They let him talk now and again. Sosno's the one that they hide because he's newer. I think he's younger, and they're like, we don't want anyone to know what he does. But together, yes, you're correct. Together, what they do with the cap, and then I think their projections and that their outlook on what this is going to look like in 2 years or 3 years, even in some cases. That is exactly that's all you're doing in the NFL, right? I mean, that's all you're trying to measure where you're going to be in 2 or 3 years with that stuff. And that's why you can get away with like a GM that drafts out of order and positional value chart and all that sort of thing, because you've got guys that are savvy and flexible and understand, like, we can make this work. It's not a big deal. And because you hear this all the time from, like, my brother's a big NBA fan. I know a lot of other people who are huge NBA fans always say, like, the cap is fake. It's not real. It's not real. And they say it's the same in the NFL. Like, well, it is real. Like, it's not. It's real. There are
the consequences are real. Right. They're very real.
That's exactly what I say. The consequences for screwing up are real and they're disastrous. However, everything else, the principle will hold. You can work your way around things. You can find answers to tough problems. Lions are finally doing that after years of claiming they were capable of doing that, never being able to do it. They are doing it with a bunch of people who don't get a lot of credit, which is probably how it should be, quite frankly. People that are grinded and trying to win a Super Bowl, because that's what's going on right here. And I don't know how else to say that after watching those three signatures. The other thing, Colton, before we move on to a little bit of schedule and then rookie talk, Hendon Hooker, this draft pick now. I saw a lot of people that were like, well, that was a wasted draft pick. Oh, no, folks. Everybody back up the train on that one. This is not a wasted draft pick. This was the best case scenario of the Hendon Hooker draft pick. Worst case scenario was that you were going to have to use him to kick Goff in the ass if he fell apart or something, and then, Hendon would have to. But no, now Hendon Hooker, I tweeted this other day, is 2 good preseason starts and like 1 injury reserve stretch of good football away from you're going to get like a second round pick for him or something if you want. So that's pretty good, and they're now in position, I think, for a pretty good deal with Hooker. Also, no pressure on him too to kind of step in and be a backup and just keep going here. Pretty good for him, I think.
Yeah, I saw people saying the same thing, like, "Oh, this is a wasted pick. Why'd you draft Hooker in the 3rd round?" And I'm like, wait a minute. You just listen to Brad say he takes the best player available, right?
Right.
All the past 2 years, the first 2 years,
gotta have it, guys. Yeah,
they've been saying like, hey, maybe we should upgrade the quarterback spot. Like fans were saying that, we were saying that. Like you need to upgrade that backup spot, right? They finally did it. They got Teddy Bridgewater to be this, the bridge backup. He's off to retirement now, and now Hendon Hooker, this guy that a lot of people might have had as a 1st-round talent or a 2nd-round talent. You get him in the 3rd.
Some did.
I know he had the injury that knocked him down. I always thought he should have been drafted in the 3rd because of the injury, but some teams were higher on him than that. So it's like you get this guy in the 3rd round, and he's got starting upside. If Goff goes down for a long stretch here or 4 or 5 games, whatever, that guy I think you feel pretty comfortable with just letting him learn the position because he's got that sort of upside to be a starter, the rare 3rd-round pick that becomes a starter. Right. And even with Goff signed long term, I still think it works because you give this guy all the opportunities in the preseason. We don't really need to see much of Goff. Like if I were the Lions, I would just sit Goff, maybe play him a series. You're good. We know what you can do. Let Hendon Hooker show what he can do.
Oh yeah,
maximize his value. Mm-hmm. I don't think you need to trade him this year, but maybe next year you get in those conversations. And if a team is desperate, or Ben Johnson leaves and wants to take a quarterback with him that knows the system,
whatever. Yeah, exactly.
You get a draft pick out of it, man. Like you probably get at least a 3rd, and that's where you draft him anyway. So like,
it's a great draft pick.
To me, it's a great position. You look back. Like, you either have a high quality pick, high quality backup quarterback, or you get what you paid for essentially when you trade him down the road. So that's kind of how I'm viewing it. Obviously, he needs to go out and prove it,
right?
Prove capable of being that guy. But I mean, the Lions clearly think he's capable of that. So
I would say it like this: like I think people got scared last year of the quarterbacks because they were looking toward this year's class, right? So I'm talking about the 2023 class, Hendon's class. Yep. I think when obviously he was hurt and that's going to knock him down. But when I look at like how he stacks up and how he stacked up coming out before he got hurt as a passer compared to like what Penix and Nix were, buddy, I got to tell you, it's about the same, if not Hooker being a little bit better in both cases than Bo Nix, healthy, whatever. And both those dudes went in the top 15 this year. So like, I said that during the draft. Some people they got too scared about Will Levis, and a lot of people paid the price on that one. I thought Hendon Hooker and Will Levis were closer together than they were further apart. And, there are still things that Will Levis has to work on. There are a lot of issues there, of course. But to me, those are similar players. They're big arms who are smart guys who can make a little bit happen in the pocket. But like, I like Hendon Hooker a lot. I think, like you said, he's got starting potential. I think if Goff got hurt and had to miss like 6 games and something, and if Hooker were ready to go and healthy, yeah, I think he has the potential to win those games.
Yeah.
And yes, like you are, like folks, I don't think people quite realize you're 4 games away. Like if Goff like hurts his hamstring and Hendon Hooker goes 3-1 or something like that, were we talking about a 2nd-round pick? Or are we talking about a 1st-round pick? Like, that's what we're talking about. So, like, I think baseline situation, he is going to be a fine backup quarterback, and it's going to be a guy that everyone's going to like, right? Like, he fits with the culture and all that. Best case scenario now is they're flirting with you could rob somebody if things work out well here. The old Matt Kessel or some of that stuff from back in the day. I don't know if that might be a little bit too far ahead, but I think people maybe need to relook at that one because that was my second reaction. Was like, now this is going to get real interesting with Hendon Hooker because you could really upsell him.
Yeah,
if it works.
Exactly. And one thing I'll add, the Lions were the team that submitted the emergency quarterback rule that got changed ahead of last season because they watched the 49ers just go through quarterback after quarterback after quarterback.
That's the other thing too, yeah.
In the playoffs. Like they were down to their, fourth-string quarterback in that
They couldn't take a snap last year.
Purdy couldn't throw the ball. Like they don't want a repeat of that. They saw that and said, nope, let's add this rule. Let's submit it to the league. It got approved. So they clearly value this quarterback position now, even the backup spot.
Oh, yeah. I think they'll always have a good backup here. I think that's what we've learned.
And so I don't know if they'll be eager to trade Hendon Hooker because you do like him as a backup and you would feel comfortable with him having to play 6 games if it came to that. And I think he could be a guy that keeps this thing on track until Goff gets back if there is an injury. Goff's been pretty durable in his career, so I don't know if that's something you really have to worry about. But it is in the back of your mind because you never know what can happen. So I don't know if they'll be like too eager to get rid of him. But again, if there's a situation where a team starter goes down and they don't have that backup and they're willing to part ways with the 2nd or 3rd round pick, I think you do it. Or again, like I mentioned earlier, if Ben Johnson wants to go to another team and finally finds the right opportunity and that team doesn't have a quarterback in place and they're not in position to draft one early, trade a 2nd or 3rd for Hendon Hooker, a guy that knows your system that you have helped develop over the first 2-3 years of his career, and start your coaching career on the right track as a head coach. So I think there are opportunities out there for the Lions to kind of turn this around and make it something appealing. And I know a lot of people are kind of going doom and gloom right now after the Goff extension, but you don't always have to go there. You really don't. There are different ways.
The other doom and gloom on that that people bring up is the age for Hooker. It's like, well, whatever. In 3 years, he's going to be 50 years old, so it's not going to matter. It's like, okay, well, first of all, fine, he's going to be an old man. But like, now I don't want to say this is about to be a trend, okay? I don't want to go that far, but it might be. Because I've been talking about this for several years now. The NFL has gotten into a habit where it gives up on quarterbacks way too early, and then we find them having a renaissance later in life. It's happened with Baker Mayfield. He just got paid. It's happened with Geno. It's happened with Goff. I mean, don't tell me that it can't happen with some of these guys. There's others that I'm not remembering off the top of my head here right now that are in position. I wouldn't be shocked to see Justin Fields someday down the road. Maybe not right away, but maybe he comes back and resurfaces. Like the value of an older quarterback when we see, and unless there's some real change in college football, which I don't see happening, this transfer portal is doing nothing to help the tutelage of players. It's doing nothing to help their training. It's doing nothing to help consistency. And so there's going to be a time in a couple of years where I'm promising you right now, where you're looking at these quarterbacks and saying like, shit, like, is it worth taking a guy in the 2nd round or maybe the bottom of the 1st who's just not even going to be close, or we'll just trade you a 2nd for a 31-year-old Hendon Hooker who started games and can play? We have a pretty good team. We think we can win some games. That's what you're going to do. You're going to take the Hendon Hooker. You're not going to take the kid who's like just not even close to being ready. And so like we're seeing more of the, you know what I'm saying? We're seeing the top end guys. We're seeing more of them coming out. They're not even close to being ready. Why is that? That's not accidental or by coincidence.
Yeah.
So having older guys is not the worst. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I said that last year when they drafted him. I liked that he was older. I still like that he's older, both for right now, the backup situation, and frankly for their situation's upside on the asset. Like, yeah, we'll see. Well, maybe he gets hurt again and the whole thing blows up, unfortunately, or whatever. But like, if all things go the way they think it's going to go, I think that's going to turn out to be a pretty good draft pick too. And there are people that don't think that Jared Goff's worth whatever, but yeah, whatever. I complain, I guess, if you want, but there's not much to complain about right now in that sense. I don't think.
No, I mean, they're exactly where they should be right now. They've got a roster that's built to win now, and you've taken care of the backup quarterback spot. So, I mean, guys, what are we talking about here? Really, what are we talking about here? There's so many years watching David Blau and Tim Boyle, and now you're complaining about Hendon Hooker as a backup. Like, come on. Let's not do this.
Not a big deal.
Spend a 3rd round pick on a good backup.
The other news this week was a schedule release, of course, and everyone knew that was going to be more of a challenge for Detroit after winning all those games or winning 12 games last year. Obviously, that's how the NFL works. But I would say, Colton, as I look at it, and I'll get your thoughts on the overall run of it. I was looking at it, and it hit me, maybe the first time in a while, that the Lions are Super Bowl contenders. Okay, well, I'm going to say that right now, full throated, that Detroit Lions 2024 are Super Bowl contenders. Because I looked at that schedule, and it is harder, and there's more playoff teams on it than they had last year, and a lot of those are winnable games. I see 12 winnable games on there at least. Again, I'm not saying that'll happen, but like that's where I feel like their roster's at. And so, I mean, that's a tough schedule, but like they're a good team. So I don't see a lot on there, Colton, that I'm like, oh God, I don't know if they're gonna make it. And we've seen plenty of those stretches over the years, right? Where it's like, I don't know if they're gonna be able to survive that. I don't think that's a thing here. They've got some tough stretches, but they're a good team, and I think that that's what I've taken away when I look at the schedule. That was my biggest takeaway. Lions are good.
Yeah. I think a lot of the issue for people or concerns, I should say, start with like you're playing a first place schedule now versus last year you're playing a second place schedule. So that gets a little tougher. The NFC
Right.
North has gotten better, we think. So I guess, yeah, the schedule on paper is definitely tougher than last year. But at the same time, the Lions are better than last year, right? Like they went 12-5 with their schedule last year. That's with probably two corners that will not start for anyone in 2024 that
Correct.
were elsewhere. You reshaped that room. You added DJ Reader to the defensive line to get the most out of that group, and Ali McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson. Added Kevin Zeitler, a Pro Bowl guard, to replace a really good young guard in Jonah Jackson, where coaches and front office people are saying this offensive line can get even better. And then your young players, that rookie class that was so dynamic a year ago. Hey, by the way, they're not going anywhere. They're still here. They're only going to get better. So, like, I think when you look at the additions they've made and then the internal growth that they'll have, kind of balances out,
Absolutely,
the difficulty of the schedule nowadays. Like, this is a good football team. This is a good roster. Typically, when you have a good roster, you're going to find success in the NFL. So, like, that's kind of how I see it. I know the schedule's a little bit tougher, but at the end of the day, I think the Lions are a better team. So, to me, it balances out. That's probably the best way to put it.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, I said this to somebody the other day on a show when somebody called and asked about it, and I was like, there's nothing on, like, yeah, they've got some tough road games on there, right? Like Dallas and San Francisco are tough road dates. Houston will be a tough one. Arizona will be probably harder than people think, but whatever. Like, they won at Kansas City last year in the damn ring ceremony. They had San Francisco scared for their life, in the NFC Championship game. Like they had Dallas beaten until they got cheated, basically in down there in December. Like, there's nothing that they haven't done yet, like in terms of regular season stuff, that I'm looking at and saying, like, and I look at some of these other teams and I'm like, okay, well, Jacksonville's got to come to, they haven't done shit yet. They got to come in here and prove something. They're a good team, sure. They haven't done anything. Rams were in here last year and lost. They got to prove it too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, Seattle has gotten the benefit of the doubt a few times on the Lions, and I think the Lions maybe think they owe them something there. Like Tampa, same thing. Buffalo got lucky in here a couple years ago, and that's a different football team now. I just like, that was my biggest takeaway on the whole thing is, yeah, there's challenges across the board on every single schedule. That's just how the NFL is now. But like, when you think of a first place schedule, sometimes I guess I think about the old Lions days. If they accidentally got first place, and then the next year it's like, oh, half the team's gone. Like, they didn't sign anybody. They're all gone, and now they got to play like at Dallas, San Francisco, at the Giants, at Cowboys, or whatever it is. And you're like, well, that's not the case here. They've actually done their due diligence, and I feel like, yeah, that's a first place schedule, but I still feel like they're going to be favorites in the North by more people than not, and they're going to be labeled Super Bowl contenders by probably most people when August rolls around, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. I think Lions fans might be conditioned to say,
yeah, you better get ready, folks.
Game by game, like, oh, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. I don't know if we can win that. That might be tough one on the, like, the Lions are that team for other fan bases now, guys. Right. Do you realize that? 100%. There are teams that are on the Lions schedule. They're like
the Colts
that
right
might
now.
Be a
Look
loss.
at them.
We might have to chalk that one up as a loss. Detroit's pretty good. That's what's happening right now. That's where the Lions are as a franchise. And so I think people have to get used to that. This team has come a long way. They went 12-5 last year. They went to the NFC Championship game. They were 30 minutes away from a Super Bowl appearance. They choked it away. Like, let's be honest. They 24-7 lead. They let that slip away. But that's the team that we're talking about. A team that should have been in the Super Bowl.
Right.
You are that team for the NFL.
It could have won it.
Could have won it.
Holy shit. Like, yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, the Lions are a good team. They've only gotten better. Their roster is stronger than it was. This is easily the most talented group that Dan Campbell's ever had in Detroit. Um, so yeah, like I said, 12-5. I predicted them to have the same exact record as last year. Would not be surprised if they went 13-4. Right? Like,
nope.
I really wouldn't. I wouldn't at this
I
point.
mean, health permitting, right? All
Right.
that,
If you stay
obviously.
healthy and everything's set up for you there, but yeah, I mean, that's the team that we're talking about with this Lions group. They should be a Super Bowl contender. They should be talked about in the top 5. I mean, you're a top 5 team, you expect to win every game on your schedule. That's
Right.
just
Yeah.
that's just how it goes.
100%. Like, I mean, they've got these games with the Titans, the Jaguars, and who's the other one there in that division that I'm forgetting?
Colts.
Colts. All three of those teams are the ones that you just said earlier. We might not be able to chalk that one up. That might be a hard loss or something if we're not ready. And like the Colts are like an exciting young team who are going to be, the Jaguars are ready to take another step. They were in here but that's not. They're going to look at that game and say we've got to work cut out for us to go in there and win, like big time. That's not going to be. You're going to look at that and say that will be like kind of like remember when Green Bay left here last year and they it completely changed their season around and it changed the path of Jordan Love's career possibly.
Yeah.
That's going to happen more, I think, this year because people need to remember, I think, how this works because it's been so long for Lions fans forever, really, in so many cases. In the NFL, people cycle out, right? Like, so a good team doesn't stay good for 10 years like they do in like the NBA or baseball. I'm not trying to talk down to anyone here, but that's how it works. So when you've drafted this well over the last 3 years, you're good. Like you're going to be good by default in places where everybody else is just going to have to scramble because you're not, unless you have a Mahomes who they don't have to play, or Lamar who they don't have to play, right? Or Rodgers who they don't have to, guys like that. Unless you have that, man, it's like it's a we'll see what happens, And I think that they've drafted so well that they're one of those teams with the core right now that it's just going to be hard to pencil in them as a win on your schedule, like you said. If you're an opponent, based on all this, it still looks fine to me. I'm not panicked at that at all.
Right. I think the thing with this schedule in particular is like there's not a lot of like, oh, that's a gimme. Like we're getting that for sure. Like
right.
There are a few maybe the Cardinals, but I think the Cardinals are actually kind of competitive.
Yeah, they'll be better.
I think the Titans maybe, but they had some good offseason. So it's like there are teams like that where like
all those teams will be better. Yep,
they'll be better than last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably the tough part about the schedule. But at the same time, there are so many games that they'll be favored to win that they probably will win. Like that's just because they're just a more talented team.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, talent wins out a lot in the NFL. So like that's kind of how I see it going. There are definitely some toss-ups there for sure. Obviously, going to Houston's going to be tough. Some of these other games on the schedule, I think, might not view that as an automatic win. Like going to San Francisco in late December, probably with a 1 seed on the line. Like that's going to be tough to do. They've had their troubles in Dallas and against the Seahawks, but again, this team is better. This is the best team they've had in Detroit. I think they'll be favored in most of their games, and I think this team has sort of the mental capacity to not overlook anyone, right? That's what gets a lot of teams in trouble. Where they walk into a stadium on Sunday and like, yeah, this will be easy. This team doesn't do that. The coaches don't let them do that. So I'm not really worried about like, potential letdowns for that reason. You're going to lose some games along the way. That's just the NFL, but I don't think it'll ever be like we weren't prepared we overlooked them. That's not how this team kind of operates. So, as long as that's how you're, coming along, yeah, they're going to win a lot of games this year.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited for training camp to get here, for the pads to come out and everything, to see some of these guys, especially some of the first year guys that were rookies last year come back, right? But then thing we wanted to wrap up with today was rookie minicamp was last weekend, I should say. I was out there for Friday, and then of course a lot of the guys will be back here. Is it next week for OTAs? Yeah, next week.
Thursday is our open practice then.
And then minicamp will be shortly after that. But I would say this, Colton, the rookies, you don't get to see much. Obviously, because they're the day that we were out there, they weren't in any pads. I don't know if they're in pads at all during the entire thing. But I will say, like we talked about how the roster was so much more competitive last year, and you could feel it. Like they're going to have a really cool training camp this year because I think they're going to get a lot of development time for the rookies this year. Because you mentioned earlier, like you're not going to have to overload St. Brown, Panay. A lot of these guys, you're going to be able to unload on them. as opposed to previous years where Sewell's taken a ton of reps, first team still tons and tons of reps. Aiden, same thing. Like some of that you can back off on. And so we're talking to guys like Giovanni Manu and Vaki and some of those guys there. I was like, man, these guys are going to get a ton of work in August or in July when the pads come on. And like, I think they're super stoked and excited for it. Did you hear anything from other than Terrion saying that he would knock his mom on the ground if she was playing receiver?
That was great.
I thought it was a cool day. They all seem like fits, like Ray Agnew said. They all feel like Lions. They all feel like the guys that we've all like. You can think of every draft pick that we've talked to that's come in here has that. Like I am here. I'm a serious football player. I'm not. And I think I was picked too low. Most of them think they were picked too low. That's the other part of it too. So your impressions from afar, and then I'll maybe give mine. But yeah, pretty cool first day. A lot of those guys seem like they fit in pretty good.
Yeah, I was following along from a beach in Miami, so that was cool.
We figured you were hungover. That was an early morning day. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just kind of hearing things here and there. Terrion just seems like he's ready to go, mentally.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how he holds up going against St. Brown and JMO when the pads come on later. But it seems like he's got them, and that's something we kind of knew about him. But the mentality, the way he talks, the confidence that he speaks with, it's all there. Watching the bond between him and Ennis already growing was really cool. It seems like those guys kind of view themselves as the future of that position, and they're kind of carrying themselves that way, which is what you want to see even early when they might not start this year, right? Like you want them to build that chemistry right now. I watched Giovanni Manu's, YouTube. The Lions put out some YouTube interviews.
Yeah.
I watched that. Man, the way some of these guys carry themselves, it's really impressive. Like
you can see why they like them, right?
Manu, Sione Vaki, Christian Mahogany, like these guys are just wired the way that you want. And I did watch Ray Agnew's press conference as well. And the one thing he kept saying is, these are Lions guys. These are guys that we specifically go out and look for. And we got every single one that was like, an option for them. They went out and traded for some of these guys, as we saw. So everyone that's here is here for a reason. It's because they fit a certain criteria for what they look for in a player. And it's why this roster is so good and why they're as mentally tough as they are from top on bottom. So even as rookies, you can kind of see it with this crew.
I'm glad you said that about how they carry themselves. I always remember this. A scout told me this a long time ago, and it stuck with me forever. Like I asked him, like, how much in your evaluation of a player does the person's like individual context matter, like their story or their history as a person, right? Not a football player, just what they've done as a human being or how they've gone through their life. And he was like, I don't think people understand. It's like 95% of the thing. It's only like the athletes are all basically the same, or whatever. You're really you're splitting hairs, but it's like 95%. It might be more, in some cases. And when you talk about a guy like Giovanni Manu who comes in and he sort of for the first time got to explain, his full story, I think to people like us that live here and not in Canada. But and when you hear it, it's like, okay, this is a guy who moves from Tonga at 11 years old to Western Canada to live with an aunt. His parents and his family, I think he was one of a bunch of, I don't know how many brothers and sisters he has, but everybody stays in Tonga except him. So he goes and lives with his aunt and develops a bond with the head coach and the coaching staff at that University of British Columbia there in Canada. And so when it comes time for him to, pick a college, because I think he went there to play to be an athlete because he was so big and they knew, okay, this guy's going to be an athlete in something. Let's try to get him in football or whatever and get him around coaches and see what happens. So he gets there and it's all brand new. And he says, I don't want to play for anybody other than this guy here, in Western Canada, University of British Columbia. And they were like, okay, fine, stay here and just play here. And, he talked about, he turned down NIL money from big time schools for multiple years to stay in Western Canada because it felt like home. That's context that I think a lot of people probably did not have on their sheet with him. It was like, well, he's in Canada because he's probably sucks and needs like a bunch of time. And he does need a lot of time, right? But maybe not as much time as people might think, maybe, right?
Right.
I like that's money when you hear a guy like that. And he talked about how he's number 59 because Sewell is number 58 and he wants to be the next Polynesian star. And the 1959 is his dad's birth year. Like, I mean, my God,
cool.
What an impressive kid. And grown adult, really, he's like 22, 23. But like that is exactly what you're saying. Like you can feel it with all of their personalities and how they're going to fit, and it's deference when it needs to be deference, and they're all very excited to be here all the way.
Yeah, Holmes talked about that a little bit. I think it was after the first day of the draft when he spoke to us. He said, "Look, like seeing how fast the guy can run or how high he can jump, that's the easy part. Like all of us
Yeah,
in this
right.
industry can do that. That's why we're paid,
Yeah, we
right?
can
Like,
do that for God's sake.
yeah, we can do that. We do it.
Right.
But that is the easy part. The tough part for him and his job and the players that he looks for um, is making sure that they fit that level that they look for, that it factor. And
Mhm.
that's a lot of times it's maturity level, it's work ethic, it's your upbringing, it's how you're wired. That's stuff you can't just measure with, a stopwatch. Like it takes
No.
those conversations, those in-person meetings, to kind of figure out who a player is, who a person is.
Mhm.
Um, because if you have two players with a similar talent level, there's run the same 40, have the same vertical, broad jump, all that stuff. There's similar ranges, but one guy's an asshole that
Yeah.
doesn't work, doesn't
Right.
put in the work, but he's gotten by on his athleticism his whole life. And the other one's trying to feed his family and
Mhm.
he's talking about his legacy and he wants to be the best. Which one are you going to take? Like,
Exactly.
let's be
It's not
honest.
hard.
But that's how they operate. And a lot of guys, it's not that black and white. It might be one thing that puts them over the top compared to another player. But that's what they look for. They want that thing
Mhm.
that puts you over the top. So that's how the Lions scout. And when you look at their draft class this year, every single player that they took fits that criteria. So
Yeah,
hear them talk,
Baki, same
it's no
way.
no
Yeah.
surprise at all.
Not at all. I mean, they all fit exactly what the culture purports to be and is, like they're all grown adults, I think is what I take away from it. They're kids, of course, like Terran Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw are kids. Just like when we hear Kirby come out with the sunglasses and he's a kid. But the difference is what you just said, Colton. Like they're all trying to feed their family and they're all trying to like live and move on to the next day. They all have that about them.
Yeah.
Like that's like you know what I mean? Like that's the best part, I feel like, at the end of the day, is all of them know that they're good enough to be here. And even if some of them have more swag than the other ones, none of them, they all work like they're going to get it taken away from them tomorrow. Like,
Yes.
you know what I'm saying? They all have that about them and it pours out of them whenever they talk. Like, that was my biggest impression. Every time we've had rookie deals with these guys the last 3 years, that's really been the overwhelming takeaway. And it really kind of was again. Like, Manu was my favorite one to talk to. Like, he was like, his parents still haven't seen him play a game, not
Oh
one.
wow.
And so he was said, obviously that's going to change this year. He thinks they're trying to surprise him. He said every time he brings it up to like sister or brother, whatever, they're like, oh, I don't know, we don't want to talk about it. And he's like, so
Yeah.
I think they're going to try to show up to like a preseason game or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, the Lions are going to have like a camera crew or something for
Yeah.
that one. That's how that's going to go. But like, that's the kind of guy they're drafting. That's the kind of guy that like the rest of the guys on the team see that too. They root for that. They help guys like that along. It's easier for an older guy to help a younger guy who wants it like that. And like that's the cult. That's what it is. It's just that simple. It's not that hard.
And when that's the environment you're fostering for everyone on the team, if you're an outsider, you will
Yeah.
be
Oh my
pushed
god.
out of here in a second. You either conform or
Immediately.
you're
Yeah.
out. Like, right? Like
Right.
you have to adapt to the situation
Mm-hmm.
around you. And if you have a team of like-minded, high work ethic,
Crazy.
strong character guys that just want to put in work and win football games,
Yeah.
how can you not follow in line, right? Like that, and
It's
that's
funny.
that's
Yeah.
the that's the whole point. That's why they get these guys in place. That's why they always like, well, we don't really want to deviate from what we look for. We're not gonna,
Give
even
a
though there's a player
trade.
that might be more talented, but he has some character concerns, Jalen Carter,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
not gonna take that player. So like that's kind of how they operate, and that's what they've done for 3-4 years now, and it's why they're at the point where they are.
I think it's very important. This will be my last point on it before we get out of here. Very important that NFL teams, everybody understand there's a difference between like when you take a chance as an organization on a guy that has character risks or whatever you want to call him, a guy that's rough around the edges, like you're putting you're putting a burden on the guys next to him in the locker room. You're putting a burden on like if it's a defensive tackle on Ali McNeil to make sure that that guy doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Or if it's a receiver, to you're putting a burden on the guys in your room. I don't think that's that's not a winning recipe. That's just not. And I know that there's some teams that will that like to do that, and that can be for some groups if you have like a generational leader in your room or something like this. But I feel like the Lions strategy of everybody come in here and take care of your own space, right? Do your job, clean up as you go, like take care of your own space, and don't make us have to worry about your shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like keep that off the field and out of the building. Like Campbell said at the one time about the teammate he played with that was an alcoholic or whatever, like back in the day, right? Remember that story? Mm-hmm. He was like, but the guy showed up, did his job every day, so he didn't care. And like, if that's all, and that was the 90s and times were different, but like, that's the type of like thing that they're trying to go for here. And I feel like there's just not a lot of guys, if at all anymore, that are on the roster that wouldn't fit that. I don't think there's any at this point.
No, I'm trying to think. I don't
they're all like that now. Yeah. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Well said.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week, I think. Next week will be more stuff, I suppose, in terms of like practice will run around. They won't hit or do anything of note, but there'll be more guys out there than your guy Theo Day and the Grand Valley quarterback who were out.
He's my guy because I covered
him. I was like, it took me like 40 minutes, but then I had to Google it where he went after Michigan State, and I was like, I can't. Northern Iowa.
Northern Iowa, yeah.
But in any event, we'll be back next week with some more stuff. Chris, I'm sure, will join us too. Thanks for everyone for listening. Be sure to keep sending those name suggestions in here as we'll be transitioning the show sooner than later. But in any event, still one of these years for now. I think they'll do it.
One of these years we'll change the name.
Yeah, we will change the name one of these years. For Colton, I'm Nick. Thanks again, everybody, and take care.